Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special developer chat with us at Privateer Press. I'm Will Hungerford, the lead developer at Privateer Press. With me is my boss, William Schoonover, the development manager at Privateer Press. And we're doing a special Gen Con 2020 developer chat to talk to you about the upcoming IKRPG 5e compatible product we're putting out in the near future. We announced this at our keynote earlier this year, that we were going to be kickstarting a 5e compatible Iron Kingdoms role-playing game series of books. So today we want to talk to you a little bit about some of the fun class options and just chat a little bit more about where we are in development with it and what's going on. If you've never joined us before, we normally stream several times a week. Obviously, with the current pandemic, it's something we couldn't do. And this is a talk we would like to be having with many of you in person at Gen Con right now, but there's no Gen Con. In fact, there's no conventions at all, so that we can all stay safe. So we felt that this was a good way to still get the information out, let you know what's going on, and bring a little bit of that feel, like we're still at Gen Con, but being safe at the same time. So before we do, if you've never watched this before, there's a couple things we want to talk about. Specifically, we at Privateer Press, if you've never seen us or haven't heard much about us before, we primarily make tabletop miniatures games. We make War Machine and Hordes, a tabletop war game. We make hobby miniatures board games like Monster Apocalypse and Riot Quest. And a lot of the miniatures, obviously they all work in those various games, but a lot of hobbyists and a lot of role players pick up our miniatures for use in their role-playing games. We actually have a service called Mini Crate. Mini Crate is a monthly subscription service. You can go buy one individual model on a given month, or you can do a 6-month subscription where you end up getting 6 full months of miniatures and then a special VIP miniature for doing the 6 months of. And every month is a different miniature, and that miniature is never made available again. It's a one and done. So we wanted to show you some of the ones we have available right now. So Mini Crate is the main line. It's mainly resculpts of War Machine and Riot Quest models. This month, the current one, if you're watching this right now, is Gore 10. It's a robotic version of one of the oldest characters in the Iron Kingdom setting, Gorton Grunback, a dwarvish warcaster.
Best robot ever.
Best robot ever.
Yeah, I really need this model.
And so we decided to just do a little play on his words. Instead of it being Gorton, being Gore 10, and him being basically like some evil corporation made a robotic version of him. Another one of our characters, Anastasia Debray, is the espionage, rogue spy type. So we decided to make a sculpt of her that really pushed that all the way and went with 00 Debray, which is the VIP model right now. If you do a 6-month subscription, you'll get her in your next shipment. Now, another line we have for you Legend of the Five Rings fans, and for those of you playing the Legend of the Five Rings RPG, is we have an L5R mini crate. Right now, the current model is Yoritomo. He's available till August 4th, so if you're watching this right around the time this video goes live, you have probably a few days left to really go pick him up before the next model swaps over. There is, of course, a VIP model if you do a 6 months of. Sheikah Spear Dancer will show up in your next shipment. And then we have a third mini crate line, which is the works of Robert E. Howard, and that is the Savage mini crate line. The current model is one of my favorite versions of Conan.
Yeah.
Conan the Savage. It's Conan with an M60. Now, this comes from, if I'm not mistaken, comics. This is from some older Marvel comics, I think. It might have been Dark Horse. I cannot remember, to be honest.
Yeah.
But this is just, if you're playing that kind of RPG where you need a barbarian with an M60, you can't really beat this model. And it's such a niche thing to pick up, like somebody's going to use it in some fantastic way. So he's still available until August 12th. Now, every Gen Con, we also partner with a restaurant, The Ram. And we do a special beer model every year. Basically, it's a model from one of our various game lines that we either have drinking a beer, enjoying a beer, pouring a beer, something to do with beer. The Ram makes a special version of a beer named after that model. They make t-shirts and mugs and so on. And even though there isn't a physical Gen Con we can go to, we are still making that model available online. So our newest war game is a sci-fi tabletop war game called Warcaster that is arriving to people as we speak.
Yeah. People are getting their shipments right now.
The Eternus Continuum is one of the factions, and one of their heaviest hitting solos is the Marauder. She is our online exclusive. She is available throughout the weekend at store.privateerpress.com while supplies last. So if you're looking for a really awesome sci-fi model, if you're playing Warcaster, or you're just a collector of the beer models that have been happening at Gen Con for over a decade now, easily, make sure you go to store.privateerpress.com and pick it up. Those fun announcements out of the way, Let's get to what we were coming to talk about today, which is the Iron Kingdoms RPG, new series of books that will be releasing in the future. They'll be Kickstarter. We haven't announced the date on when that's happening right now. It is still in development. Myself, Oz, and Matt Getz are all working on it. And we wanted to let you know some of the features you could see and just talk to you a little bit about it.
Yeah. So we've gotten a lot of questions since we announced it during the keynote that it was coming and it was going to be 5e compatible about what it was going to entail. And a lot of the development work is still happening, so we don't have everything fully ironed out. But we have a lot of those ideas baked in and are either currently working on them right now or are going to be starting on them really soon. But some of the stuff we can talk to you about today is the classes that are going to be in this book. So the Iron Kingdoms is a wide and varied world. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. And if you don't know, if you're not one of our players or have not paid a lot of attention to our game, War Machine is the civilized, human, industrial side of the Iron Kingdoms, and Hordes is the wild, monstrous side. You've got Druids and other people that control giant monsters instead of running around with giant robots. So this book is going to feature primarily the human kingdoms and the industrial side of the game, and then in the future we'll explore more stuff. If you want to know anything about the game, you can go to home.privateerpress.com/IKRPG Requiem, because Requiem is the name of this first book, and that will let you sign up for a mailing list and get other information in the future as we build that site out more as the game progresses and becomes more real.
Yeah. So Iron Kingdoms RPG started back with Witchfire Trilogy.
Yeah.
Back in the old 3.5 days, and that's when people first got their taste. That was before any of the tabletop war games even existed. The Iron Kingdoms fundamentally are a steam-powered fantasy setting.
Yeah.
So this is a setting where you have sorcery, you have swords, you have firearms, you have rifles. But one of their biggest technological breakthroughs is Mechanica. And Mechanica is basically a fusion of magic and science to create weapons. So someone might create a Mechanica sword instead of a traditional arcane enchanted sword. The Mechanica sword is literally powered. It is used with the various runes they carve in it. There's very specific magics they have to use. It's also a very kind of a dangerous technique to use. But people able to wield Mechanica have a distinct advantage over those that don't when they're out. Now, obviously not everyone uses Mechanica. It's a pretty rare resource. So if you're out in the wilds and you run into, say, some Trollkin, those Trollkin shamans may still just, take you out using earth, wind, air, and water magic. The primal forces can be just as potent, but Iron Kingdoms is a setting where we've seen the rise of nations, we've seen industrialization take place, and most importantly, the main human kingdoms have created warjacks. So warcasters are basically a special type of battle wizard. These are martial wizards who have the ability to connect to constructs called warjacks. Warjacks are giant steam-powered mechs. They don't have anybody inside of them. In fact, they have an arcane brain called a cortex that allows them to do very, very simple things. They can understand simple commands almost at a computer level, like go there, attack this, break that wall.
Yeah, they're as smart as the most trainable animals, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But warcasters have a way to psychically connect to the cortex of jacks, sometimes multiple jacks, and control them directly. They can see through their eyes, they can move their hand, and the jack's hand moves. And suddenly, when a normal person is making a megaton series of robots fire with their level of precision and reflexes, it becomes a serious, serious detriment to their enemies. So warcasters and warjacks have become the preeminent sort of method of warfare, and the world has reacted around this.
Yeah, but there are also mercenary warcasters wandering around the world who are scraping pennies together and trying to buy enough coal to keep their, kind of junky warjack running that falls apart every once in a while.
The one they've got to wrench back into place every now and then.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're going to see in this game on the player character side is going to be those kind of adventurers. So you're going to be those rough and kind of scrambling for resources people trying to maintain a warjack or two if you're a very, very well-to-do mercenary band. So Warcaster is going to be one of the classes.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just so that we're clear, Warjacks and Warcasters, while they're a very important piece of the setting, you don't have to have one by any means. You can very much have a traditional group of any kind of role-playing group you could think of. If you want to be a band of rogues trying to rob places, if you want to be more primal shamans, if you just want to be a group of sellswords that don't have any magic at all and just run around and beat things to death for money, you can do that. It's a very deep setting with a ton of lore. Since the old 3.5 days, the Full Metal Fantasy IKRPG setting, you're going to have this very in-depth world to explore, which is one thing before we talk about the classes we probably want to touch on. For those of you that have followed the 20 plus years of lore of the Iron Kingdoms, Requiem is the next step in what has happened after. So to catch all of you up, here is the super fast version of what has just happened in the Iron Kingdoms. Humans, we've learned, have gotten the ability to ever use magic in the first place because one of their gods, named Thamar, made a deal with otherworldly beings called Infernals. This was to throw off the Orgoth invasion who had imprisoned all the humans in the Iron Kingdoms long, long ago, and giving them the gift of magic let them fight back and throw off their shackles. But the price was the Infernals would come back one day and they would claim a massive amount of humanity's souls as payment for giving humans the gift of magic. Humans didn't know this. In fact, a lot of the gods didn't know this.
Yeah.
So the Infernals, basically Iron Kingdom demons, just invaded. And everyone banded together to fight them off. And Requiem takes place after the Infernal invasion, which this will be a lot of your first look at what the Iron Kingdoms look like post the Infernal invasion, which was a huge catastrophic event in the setting.
It's a time of relative peace. Like, we've had times in the setting where the major nations were actively at war. One of the countries, Lael, got conquered by another empire, and there was fighting, and it was all divided. And now that everything has settled down during this Requiem time period, nobody's actively fighting. But a lot of the world is wrecked, and there's a lot of jobs that need to get done that are small, that are adventure-y kind of jobs. And Infernals are still wandering around and popping up every once in a while and making deals with human wizards and sorcerers and stuff for extra power. So you're going to be able to fight the Infernals that you've seen recently appear on the tabletop in War Machine.
Actually, don't we have the new cover art available that we can
do.
show? Because there's something we want you to just see real fast if you missed it the first time.
Yeah.
So this is the new cover art that will be on one of the main books. And so that you know, when we kickstart this, we're looking at 3 books to start. A main setting book that's going to have all the player options we're going to be talking about today, an adventure, and a monster nomicon, basically a Iron Kingdom specific monster bestiary.
Yep.
So in this piece of art, we see kind of a traditional looking adventurer group in the Iron Kingdoms. It's Dan and Blythe and Bull is the 2 characters. That's the female warrior and the trollkin by her side. 2, I believe, unknown characters, if I'm not mistaken, Oz. The Rulic character and the Gobber.
As far as I know, these are not pre-existing characters.
Okay, I didn't think they were. And this really gives you a feel of what the Iron Kingdoms looks like. Now, for those of you looking in the background, what you see calcified in one of the walls is a fallen, infernal, basically colossal-sized horror. Something the size of, a building, or the other colossals and gargantuans, these gigantic beasts and robots the other nations bring to bear, which is something you might see show up on the tabletop in War Machine sometime very soon.
Yeah.
And then skyships in the distance, the most recent technological breakthrough in the Iron Kingdoms.
Now those are the militaries of the kingdoms have skyships. There's not just like a bus service that runs and flies around in the sky.
No, you can't just catch a ride on
No. But hey, you could maybe hijack, a skyship as an adventure. The adventure is gonna focus right around Corvus. The place that we explored some in the Iron Kingdoms board games, Widow's Wood and that kind of area. And because Corvus has a very involved undercity, a lot of tunnels and caverns and old streets that have just kind of sunk and stuff, and lots of shenanigans go on down there.
Tons of shenanigans.
So the adventure is gonna be focused around there, but the rest of the book will also have background, setting material, history, and a gazetteer that will explore interesting points all around the world and give you little adventure hooks for all those places.
Now, we're about to get into the meat of today's topic, and one thing we want to point out is, as Oz was saying all the stuff in there, while a great deal of it is very Iron Kingdom specific, we are specifically designing and developing a lot of the rules on classes, subclasses, and many spells to where you could use them in any campaign.
Yeah.
So, for example, some of the firearms and the mechanica and the warjacks, that feels very Iron Kingdoms, and you may not want that in, say, your more low fantasy setting. But The Oath of the Wall, for example, which is a new subclass for Paladins, a new archetype for Paladins, that would fit perfectly in any campaign you want. So even if you don't necessarily want to run an Iron Kingdoms campaign, there's going to be a lot of material for you as a player and as a DM that you can use in your games.
Yeah, we're trying to build a lot of DM examples and options to make a game of 5e feel like the IK if you want it to, but we're also trying to make this stuff seamlessly fit into any campaign. So if you are about to play a rogue and you really love one of these subclasses, it should work seamlessly in your regular campaign.
So let's go ahead and talk about our topic today, which is that we're going to go through all the classes that you'll find in this first core book. Now, if there's not a new class or a archetype for an existing class that you were like, oh, I wish that was in there, don't worry. This is just the core book. Classes and subclasses, further expansions, we'll add things on.
Yeah. So the Alchemist is one of the brand new classes that we're putting in the game. And alchemy is very, very important in the Iron Kingdoms. The Alchemists, around the time of the rebellion against the Orgoth, are the people who invented firearms, and they do all kinds of other stuff like that. Magic potions that heal you don't exactly exist in the setting, so alchemy is a lot of where that kind of stuff comes from. And we're going to do 3 subclasses, and keep in mind all this stuff might get name tweaks and those kind of things as we go, because a lot of this is being figured out and we're trying to find the perfect naming conventions and stuff. But as an alchemist, you're going to be able to collect resources and brew things during your rests and those kind of stuff. And then you're going to be able to choose between being a rogue alchemist, which is more than likely someone who's involved in criminal activity, and is a little bit sneaky like you would expect a rogue to be, but is also still an alchemist. A combat alchemist who focuses on throwing grenades and shooting crossbow bolts that have crazy alchemical effects. And then what we're playing right now with a placeholder name as the synthesist. We're not sure if that's going to be the name or not. But that's a person who's exploring new alchemical formulas and discovering new things and figuring out ways to create alchemical ingredients that kind of cross between 2 things so we can cook things easier and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the class feels very utility, very strong role-playing opportunities. It's not all just fight, fight, fight. There's a lot of really cool things you'll be able to do with just brewing up different alchemical blends and working within the storyline. But to me, it feels very close to a rogue almost, but with a lot of different options. I mean, you're looking at a D6 hit die kind of class, and just being able to, in the middle of a fight, look over and be like, I'll grab this, and I'll grab this, and I'll grab my little kit. I'm going to brew something up and then throw it, and it does, it sticks someone to the wall, or it's flammable. You have a lot of really cool, fun, and creative options. I think the Alchemist is going to lend itself to some really fun and creative solutions to traditional role-playing problems, like the door is locked, I dissolve it. Yeah, things like that.
And if you've played previous versions of the Iron Kingdoms role-playing game, we are incorporating some of those concepts into this. So there's going to be simple alchemy that you can just 2 ingredients, pour them together, and suddenly a cloud of smoke appears. And then there's going to be more complicated alchemy that you have to go find a burrowmog adrenal gland and those kind of things, and then make up a big crazy concoction that takes you a day to brew and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So for barbarians, there are no additional class rules in this book again.
Barbarians are a little bit more wild than we want to focus on for the kind of civilized industrial Iron Kingdoms. So you can expect in the future to see things like Tharn Ravagers and stuff looked at as barbarians in their own standalone products.
Yep. For bards, fell callers are a really well-known part of our setting. So we are going to have we're going to have rules to play the races such as Trollkin, Iozans, Nis, Gobbers, the Rulik, which are the dwarves. And Fellcaller is actually a specific Trollkin archetype. So only Trollkin PCs can be a Fellcaller. What a Fellcaller is basically a bard that shouts you to death.
Yeah, it's a yelling bard.
It's a yelling bard, and or uses their shouting abilities to help allies. They do not sing melodious tones to make you feel better. They just yell really loudly, and from you can't see me on camera, I'm pointing to my stomach right now, from the gut, from the inside, and it comes out. And one of their most common and best known within the Iron Kingdom's tactics is they can shout so loud that it will literally buckle armor and knock people over and splinter trees in half. But they can also do things like make all of their companions fight beyond wounds that would normally hurt them. They can make it to where everyone who has been, say, held in place, restrained, grappled, or knocked prone suddenly like just gets the courage to stand up and bolster themselves. They have a lot of different tactics. They are braggarts, though. They aren't just loud in application of their magical voice. They like people to know what they're all about, and they can yell it across great distances to inform you.
They live a pretty loud lifestyle in general.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. One of my favorite, so the archetype has a variety of fel calls you can learn, and then things you can do with some of your bardic abilities that extends their range. But there's a fun minor little ability that we're toying around with, where you can carry your voice over just incredible distances.
Yeah.
Which, for role-playing purposes, is just a blast. You could play Marco Polo from miles away with a fel caller if you needed to.
You could heckle a fort in a valley from the mountainside 2 miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to start an avalanche, by the way.
Yeah. And we're going to do these kind of in alphabetical order.
Yeah, absolutely.
So clerics are next. Mm-hmm. And the way that 5e works, you can imagine that your god gives you any particular powers, because there's clerics of life healing, clerics of necromancy, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to add some new domains that fit kind of specifically along the lines of a thematic god's thing. But this is not going to stop you from saying, well, I want to be a Thamorite cleric and take necromancy stuff.
Absolutely.
So the 3 things that you can be in this book are, and we don't have full names for them in this document, they're all kind of in flux right now, but you can basically be a Minite cleric, a Morrowind cleric, or a Thamorite cleric.
So Minite, the god of Minoth, is the creator of man, and he is a very, very strict god.
Very lawful.
Very lawful, and very worship me or burn. That's your options.
I made you, I'm the boss.
Yeah, I made you, I'm the boss. Yeah. Do exactly what I say, exactly how I say to do it, down to the letter of the law, and if you fail me, you are to be burned at the stake. So his followers tend to be zealots, and not the worst kind of zealots at that. Morrow, in contrast, is a god of compassion. Yeah. A god, also a battle god. A lot of martial followers will worship Morrow, but understand wisdom and honor on the battlefield, and sometimes even showing compassion to your enemies, not just slaughtering everyone that gets in your way. Mm-hmm. Thamar is Morrow's dark sister, and Thamar is sort of a god of intrigue, shadows, deception. She's all about sort of achieving what you need to achieve by utilizing others, hiding in the shadows, manipulations, plot, treachery, things like that.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some fun domain spells and some fun domain abilities if you're a cleric of one of those gods. And as we mentioned, there will be more gods added in later supplements.
Yeah, and these will be new domains that you can apply to other gods if they fit your campaign that you're playing that has nothing to do with the Iron Kingdoms.
Similar to the Barbarian, we're not adding anything for Druids in this book because this book is mostly the Iron Kingdoms and the civilized nations, and Druids definitely fall into the forces of things like the Circle of Boros.
Yeah, the Circle of Boros deserves a deep dive of its own, so we're going to set Druids aside. Now, if you are building a party for when this book comes out and you really want to play in the Iron Kingdoms, there's nothing that stops you from using existing Druid stuff.
Not at all.
And playing a Blackclad from hordes and running around with, an Argus or whatever. But we want to take time and fully explore that in our own way in its own books.
Things like Tharn shapeshifters and stuff would be but later on.
Yeah. So the mechanic is the next new class. You can't have giant robots running around without a means of fixing them.
Or Mechanica being such a big part of the setting.
So the mechanic class is going to be about fixing stuff and building stuff in general. And then it's got 3 subclasses. It's got a field mechanic who's about making sure stuff on the battlefield stays running. Mm. It's going to have an iron head, which is a person in a big steam suit of armor. We've got a few of those characters in our miniatures games. And we've explored that in the old 3.5 version. There was an entire book that was partially that. So that's a person that instead of focusing on keeping the warjacks running and all that stuff, they've just kind of got their own hot rod suit that they tinker with. and they run around in a big steam-powered suit, maybe with a crane on the back of it and a cannon on the shoulder, and they're their own wrecking crew by themselves. And then the third one is the arcane mechanic. These are the people that are magic touched, they're gifted a little bit, and they're the people that can make mechanica. So if you want to build a sword that shoots lightning, as long as it has a battery in it, a magic battery, then that's what the arcane mechanic's going to do. So we're going to have a crafting mechanica section, and the arcane mechanic's going to deal right along with that stuff. But also have other magical abilities. You can imagine this a lot like other classes that can do a little bit of magic, like some rogues that can cast spells, or Eldritch Knights or something like that. So it's a mechanic that can also have access to some magic.
And a big thing is, it's easy to think of a mechanic as just, if you were playing a mechanic like, oh, I guess I'm just a crafting character and I fix people's stuff when they get broken. You have a lot of active role.
Yeah.
Including things like being able to improve the gear temporarily of your allies in combat. So it's not just fixing what's broken, it's coming up with makeshift solutions where, you kick the door in and a bunch of pharaoh come rushing at you, and all of a sudden the mechanic can run up to your warrior, your paladin, whoever it might be, and rig something real fast onto their weapons or their armor to protect them temporarily, including like how well you make your skill checks, how long it lasts, what those benefits are. So you're not purely reactive. You definitely have a very proactive role as a mechanic.
Yeah.
Fighters are going to see 3 martial archetypes. We're first going to have the battle chaplain, which is, it's very easy to think like a paladin kind of is a battle chaplain, but we're definitely going more on the raising the spirits of others, sort of praising and keeping, praising your god, keeping up the what's the word I'm looking for here, Oz?
The well-being, the health,
I'm trying to think of the best way to
morale
put it. Yeah, the morale.
bit.
The
Yeah.
word morale escaped me for some reason. It just does that sometimes.
It does, yeah.
Keeping up the morale of others, but being still a martial fighter in the name of your god.
Being able to get in the front lines. Battle chaplains in the Iron Kingdoms are followers of Morrow, usually. Yeah. And they are there on the front lines of battles to make sure that, people are taken care of health-wise. But also, Morrow in general gives people abilities to deal with the undead and stuff. So we're going to explore that more in the Morrowind subclasses here. But this one is a fighter subclass that can make sure people are fighting to full capacity with us through healing or improving the morale or those kind of things.
They also have some anti-magic capabilities as well, of getting rid of blasphemous magics affecting your friends. I can't believe I forgot the word morale.
It happens.
How does that happen?
It happens.
The other subclass, the 2 subclasses, the next one is the man-at-arms. Now, man-at-arms is basically a warrior that has training with a wide variety of weapon types, almost to like the expert level with all of them, but specifically they use these in a very defensive manner. These are fighters that if you want to protect others in your party and then also sort of react to them being hurt or someone attacking them, being able to jump in the way using some of your weapons, being able to use your weapons reactively to prevent others from being hurt, that kind of thing. These are, if you were to go to a mercenary guild and say, I need a bodyguard. I need a bodyguard to take me down the road. There's been bandits waylaying people. You would hire a man-at-arms. Mm-hmm. They'll be the one who jumps in the front and starts fighting, but at the same time, they'll make sure the job they've been hired to do, that they're going to protect that thing and keep that thing safe from a wide variety of threats. Because they understand how to use so many weapons, they understand how to counteract so many different types of weapons.
And if you're an existing player in War Machine or you've been following us for a long time, the Ogre and Brokur, the mercenary model that can attach to a client and fights better when they're around them, is the inspiration for this class in every iteration, basically, of the RPGs that we've ever done.
Yeah. The third one is very specific to the Iron Kingdoms. Now, we said a lot of these classes and these archetypes were usable in other campaigns, but a few of them were very, very specific.
Yeah.
The Storm Knight is the third one. There is a type of technology used by the nation of Signar, which is storm technology. Basically, imagine almost Tesla-style technology used in armor and weapons. So you could have a storm lance. This is a lance that would have a mechanica discharge that functioned like a normal lance, where you have a knight on horseback riding. But when they hit somebody with the lance, it would discharge electricity that would spark over that person and then over their enemies. Or you could have, storm glaives, same kind of thing. Similarly, these warriors trained to use storm weaponry have a special type of armor that keeps them from frying themselves in the process.
Yeah, because there's a lot of lightning flying around, so you need some insulation.
And so we're creating a whole set of gear specifically for Storm Knights that are going to have a new special weapon property called Storm, which will allow them to discharge it, how it works, how many times you can use it. It also has drawbacks that if you're not wearing your Storm armor, there's a chance that you just shock yourself every time you use it. So a Storm Knight does not want to wake up in the middle of the night when they weren't on watch and start wielding their Storm weapons while they're just got their loincloth and tabard on.
Mechanica has an off switch. If you get ambushed in your underwear in the middle of the night, don't flip that sword.
Don't flip it on.
Just use it as a sword. It's perfectly fine as a sword.
So Storm Knights are going to be able to encapsulate the various types of Storm Knights. These are from Storm Guard, who use large weapons, to traditional Storm Knights, to those that you would use the lances, even Storm Gunners, who have the more, you could use it to hit someone in melee if you wanted to, but it's all about sort of projecting that storm electricity forward and through the battlefield to actually sort of create an ionization effect so that other Storm Knights can even hit better, and other lightning effects like Lightning Bolt, for example, get drawn into the electrical storm that they're creating. So Storm Knight, very Iron Kingdom specific, but a lot of fun little tools you can use in any campaign.
Yeah. The next thing is another brand new class. We're calling it right now for a placeholder the Gunslinger. That might be its real name and it might not be. And like Hungerford mentioned in the beginning of this, the Iron Kingdoms has firearms. It has firearms that are above the level of like muskets and flintlocks and stuff, but aren't fully modernized weapons.
Yeah.
It does have revolver style weapons and brass cartridges and those kind of things, but they're not completely all the way up to modern weaponry.
Yeah.
But we need a class that's about guns, so we're making the Gunslinger.
And I was going to say, and Mechanica guns are a big thing in the setting too, which is a big deal, because you can have guns that, just like the Mechanica swords and shields, you can shoot magic bullets at people. So this class will help you play those kind of characters that are trained to use magic guns and do all kinds of crazy trick shots.
So we're going to have a pistolier, a person that is exceptionally good at fighting with hand weapons, handguns. We're going to have a rifle character that's a sniper class,
all about long arms,
something like that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have the gun mage, and the gun mage is one of the most iconic things that's ever existed in the Iron Kingdoms. It's a spellcaster who has rune inscribed bullets and a gun with runes on it that makes sure that when you use spells through it, the gun doesn't explode. And they can cast spells onto their bullets to make them bounce off of things or explode, interestingly. And
or have a bullet go through a wall.
Or have a bullet phase ghostly through a wall and become real again and hit something on the other side. So you're going to be able to play, whether you want to focus on pistols or rifles or magic bullets, you're going to be able to play a person who exceeds at using guns in the Iron Kingdoms with this book.
Now, you might be like, well, if I can play a gun mage who can make bullets face through walls, why would I ever look at the pistolier or the rifleman? Well, we're definitely making sure that the pistolier is the average adventurer who is just amazing with using standard firearms. They can walk in with a brace of handguns and just lay down a withering amount of fire. Similarly, the rifleman is going to be able to kind of sit back with maybe like a Vanar Liberator from Khador and just snipe people, or any other traditional form of long arm. The gun mage doesn't quite shoot as good with just pistols as the pistolier, doesn't quite shoot as well with just rifles as the rifleman, but they get all the tricks and all the magic to make up for that.
And keep in mind, when you're playing a lot of role-playing games, if you're shooting a bow, you can recover your arrows. You're like, I go and I get, 2 of my arrows broke, but I get the other 8 arrows I shot. Bullets are bullets. They're not coming back. And gun mage bullets are super expensive and time-consuming to create.
They are.
So that gives we're not going to deep dive into the economy of the Iron Kingdoms and stuff in this game, but that does give you a little bit of balance of I have to spend part of my rest every day creating more bullets if I'm a gun mage. Whereas if I'm a pistolier, I can just walk into a shop and say, "Give me some bullets," and they'll sell you some bullets.
Also, just in terms of introducing a gunslinger class, because introducing guns into fantasy, there's a lot of fun things to consider. Like, you're walking around the dungeon and you see a monster. The archer can walk up and be like, "I shoot an arrow at it, it falls over dead, no problem. No one else in the dungeon knows we're here." If you're playing a gunslinger and you're like, "I see the monster, I'll get it," bang, and then. If you've ever shot a gun underground, you know that everyone's going to know you're there.
Unless you have a Mechanica gun that has some sort of silencing spell carved in its runes, That's an option.
It's true.
Yeah.
Monks, of course, are getting 2 new subclasses. Now, monks in the Iron Kingdoms are usually very strongly associated with the various gods, and that is no different in what we're doing.
Yeah.
We are going to have 2 new orders that you can take, but you can also use these orders completely separate from the gods if you want to. Mm-hmm. The first one is the Order of the Fist.
Yeah.
Or the Order of the Way of the Fist.
But in our setting and in War Machine and stuff, there's a model called the Monk of the Order of Fist, and that's what this is.
So these monks traditionally would be following Minoth, but use them however you want to. Very, very strict to themselves, and they are all about, they are the most traditional, I'm going to do crazy mystical arts with my fists that we can think of from a lot of like pop culture and so on. If you want your fist to turn red hot and put a hole through someone, if you want to be able to stop someone's heart with a single blast, if you want to enter specific stances, one of the things about the Order of the Way of the Fist is they have something called the Shifting Sand Stance, where they walk up and they enter the stance during their turn. And they stay in this stance as long as they don't move during their own turn. But every time an enemy attacks them and misses them, or a variety of other things happen, they get to move around without causing opportunity attacks. So they walk up and imagine sort of going into like crane stance and standing there and sort of being like, come at me. And while they're in that stance, they can actually start affecting further out than just their normal melee range with a variety of mystic arts. One of my favorite things they can do for a key point later on when they're more powerful is for a single attack, they can make the kinetic force of their blow reach far further than their normal melee range. So the idea of this Order of the Way of the Fist, taking their palm and doing a palm strike in front of them, and then say 50 feet away, somebody feeling it. If you can imagine a room full of candles, and they do that, none of the candles blow out, except for one candle 50 foot away, and then one person who just goes flying into a wall. That is the Order of the Way of the Fist.
Yeah. The other one's really interesting. Is the interesting, exciting thing, because it's brand new content that we've never ever had before.
I think this is the one when you let me. Oz said he wanted me to develop this one, and I was like, let's get weird.
Yeah, and I came up with this. I pitched it. I said it doesn't make any sense for this not to exist in the setting, so let's make this. And then Hungerford was like, how weird is it? I'm like, well, let's see.
So we made a Thamorite monk. So Thamar, being this god of deception and shadows, we've made basically the Way of Deception. This is a psychic-based monk that can do things like steal the memories of people it hits. So you can do things like literally hit somebody, use a key point, they have to make a save, and if they fail it, you will end up sifting through their memories in a blink of an eye, stealing a single memory from them. You will remember that memory as if you had been that person, and they will forget it.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of just things where you can trick people. They also make excellent spies because they have tremendous muscular control. So they can do things like literally change the gait of their walk, or say they have a hood up. They can control the muscles in their face to cause themselves to have a slightly different appearance, where if somebody was just looking at them quickly, wouldn't recognize them as who they are. They can't change, make themselves look from like, say, halfling to orc or anything that big.
Yeah.
But say you're a human walking in a crowd, even at like very low levels, you can make yourself very difficult to notice just because you completely change the entire demeanor of your character and how you appear. This includes speech patterns, the way you walk, even like little social tics. This also allows you to possibly, with a disguise kit, be incredibly good at imitating and impersonating other people. They have a ventriloquist ability later on that you can just mimic anyone's voice. And if someone can't see you, they just believe that that's that person. So if you want a more tricksy monk that can also mess with people's minds, the Order, the Way of Deception is going to be the way to go.
Yeah, and if you haven't followed the Iron Kingdoms before, up until very recently, the Thamarites were kind of an outlawed religion. Maro was the accepted good god, and Thamar, his twin, was the dark, evil, selfish, bad god. Mm-hmm. And so there were lots of Thamarite sites that had to be protected in secrecy by people who could keep secrets.
Yeah.
So this order developed around people who were there to basically make sure no one found their religious site in the basement of some building or in some catacombs or whatever. And so they established themselves as a way to keep secrets and blend in and steal secrets and that kind of stuff.
So over on the Paladin end of things, we're going to have 2 new oaths. And again, these are traditionally in the Iron Kingdoms associated with specific gods, but usable however you want to. We've got the Oath of the Wall as a new archetype. And this is a Paladin that can literally make their flesh as hard as steel and become a living wall.
Yeah.
They're not just purely protection, though. They're specifically protection of the innocent and retaliation for their harm. So this is a martial or an oath subclass that's going to be about being able to increase your armor class and the armor class of others near you, but when someone does get hit, being able to use reactions to strike back. And those kinds of reactions are varied. They have different types of effects. This is a very damned if you do, damned if you don't type of Paladin subclass. I'm harder to deal with, and then if you ignore me and hurt everyone around me, I'm going to punish you for doing so.
Yeah.
There's also going to be the more Morrowind-themed Paladin oath, which is the Oath of Radiance. So Paladins and holy warriors that follow Morrow often are given charge of burial sites. They despise the undead.
Undead are a problem in the Iron Kingdoms.
Yeah,
they're a pesky problem.
There's a whole nation of them.
Yeah.
And Morrowind priests and paladins very specifically make sure that the dead stay dead and that burial sites stay consecrated and that people don't go and mess with them. They're all about cleansing unclean magics and preserving the sanctity of funeral rites.
Yeah.
So the Oath of Radiance very much plays into that. This is a very strong anti-undead, anti-infernal, anti-otherworldly invader, planar invader style paladin that's all about making sure that the areas that are sanctified remain sanctified, but that anything that is outside of the natural order, that's something that has come in, and undead are probably the top dog in terms of outside the natural order. They're particularly not just damaging them, but really debilitating them, giving them a lot of disadvantages for just being around their radiant aura. They bring daylight into the darkest situations.
Yeah, and if you're a player of our game, then the Precursor Knights are what inspired this Paladin concept.
Yeah.
You wrote this next one too.
I just looked.
I mean, you're talking for a while.
Well, I did all the monk. So we've been going back and forth, but we were trying to hit the ones that we wrote. And I looked down the sheet, and I was like, because Getz had done Gunslinger, and I was like, wait, I did monk, paladin, ranger, and rogue. I was like, this is just going to be a lot.
I mean, we can bounce back and forth.
This is gonna be, you know what? You do ranger.
So there's a lot of subtypes in the Iron Kingdoms that fit rangers, but we wanted to pick just a few to do in this first book. So we'll probably eventually do other things down the road that exist in other ways. And a good point to make real fast is that a lot of stuff exists that we didn't need to recreate. Yeah, there's other core 5e stuff that kind of covers what we're doing in the Iron Kingdoms to a certain extent.
We didn't need to reinvent the wheel on things that were already perfectly good to go. Like, we weren't like, oh, it has to be this. It's like we're trying to supplement it with new material that helps really flesh out your options as a player in DM.
Yeah, so the most basic thing we're adding is bounty hunters. People who hunt people. So you could pull this off with a regular ranger class, taking humans as your favorite enemy and that kind of stuff. But we wanted to really lean into that tracking and subduing and catching people.
Contracts are a big part of this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the class abilities in Bounty Hunter that are built around how many contracts you can have at a time, and then the specific benefits you get against the contracted humanoids that you've been hired to go bring in, whether it's dead or alive.
Yeah.
And a lot of your abilities as a ranger, if you're trying to track somebody, are strong, but against your contracts in particular, really get amplified. And part of that is this does encourage a lot of role play and a lot of interaction in the various civilized nations. Because if you're, say, playing in the middle of the forest the whole campaign, and there's no one to get contracts from, the bounty hunter loses a lot of what makes it a good archetype.
Yeah, but it's also a really, really, really easy adventure hook. I mean, tons and tons of campaigns start with an old guy in a bar handing you a piece of paper and telling you to run out and do something.
Yes.
And so that's very baked into this. The GM can throw side quests at your party by saying, oh, you just passed through town and you saw that there's a wanted poster up, and that matches that person who you just saw back there, or the description of the bad guy who's doing the thing that someone else sent you to do. So there's a lot of places you can tie that contract bounty hunting in.
Yep.
The Mage Hunter has to exist in the game because there's an entire faction in War Machine that's all about hunting human magic users. So we're going to save a lot of the Retribution of Cyrus stuff for future products, but we wanted to touch on those kind of things in this first game, because if you're playing an Iozan Elf, then more than likely a large part of why you might have been living in the human kingdoms in the past is because you were secretly hunting mages. And we also wanted to do something new as a ranger that's anti-magic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really fun things that this class does. If you want to be, favored enemy spellcaster basically doesn't exist, but if you can kind of keep that in your head and what that would be, that is what this archetype does. And it has really awesome, fun, and flavorful abilities in terms of being able to walk into a room and realize there's arcane residue left behind, like residuals of spellcasting, and being able to follow the trail and be like, I believe a spell around this spell level was cast. You may not know what spell it was, and be able to follow sort of the arcane leavings and figure out, get to whoever cast it. And things like, say you have a spellcaster with powerful concentration spells. You can just sometimes use, once per day kind of abilities to just break someone's concentration with an arrow. Being able to not just hunt down magic users, but really disrupt everything that they're doing.
Yeah. And then the last one, Requiem, is all about that after the Infernals have shown up and things have gotten a little different than your standard version of the Iron Kingdoms from a while ago. Mm-hmm. So we're doing the Vigilant, the Order of Elimination Vigilant, which just came out in War Machine as a mercenary model that was, a ranger who hunts Infernals specifically.
Yeah, this is your traditional witch hunter class. So if you're looking to hunt otherworldly creatures like Infernals, Grimkin, or even undead, much like we were talking about the Paladin with the Oath of Radiance being all about keeping things that are outside the natural order in check, whereas they take the much more sanctified, protective route of doing so and then debilitating the evil that comes to them. The Vigilant is the one that goes out to hunt down the evil. Yeah. So if you want to, again, play a very traditional witch hunter style ranger archetype, this is the one you're going to want to reach for. Over on the rogue side of things, we do have two subclasses. There's going to be the Cutthroat and the Duelist. So the Cutthroat, if you've ever wanted to play a rogue that started off as a criminal lackey and worked their way up to a criminal mastermind, that's what the Cutthroat is. The Cutthroat is a very, very strong combat class. It has a lot of really interesting backstab options. Effectively, if you sneak attack, you will have various options of things you can do when you sneak attack, various ways to twist the knife, as it was. But they're an intimidation rogue. They're all about bullying people, getting what they want to through intimidation, extorting people, and being a very traditional criminal syndicate style rogue. The Duelist, on the other side, is literally what it sounds like. So in the Iron Kingdoms, a common tradition amongst the nobles is to resolve things via duels. You imagine your own traditional, two people back to back, guns in hand, take their steps, turn around, fire. But they also hire people to fight in their stead. And
some old fat noble guy is not going to get out there and win a duel for his honor all by himself.
He might be a really good shot.
Maybe. But what if his opponent picked swords?
Well, then he would hire a sword fighter duelist.
He would hire a sword fighting duelist.
Duelists are very agile, acrobatic, performance martial artisans is the best way to put it. You're going to be doing lots of flourishes, lots of being able to, especially if you get into a one-on-one situation where you can taunt people to get different effects, and just being able to make a show out of your fight, but being very, very good at sort of single target one-on-one duels. And especially if you can compel someone into a duel with you, they're going to be in a lot of trouble unless they cheat.
Yeah. So the next three classes are not getting content in this book. So sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards have a lot of options existing already in 5e. And we want to explore sorcery in the setting more, but it's kind of more on the wild side because human magic is more of a science to a certain extent. And we are touching a little bit on like albino trolls and those kind of things, but we're going to save sorcery for now. Warlocks are a big, interesting class that has some tie-ins with other ideas in our role-playing games in the past. But a warlock is a really good way to make an infernalist if you're creating an NPC for your campaign, because Infernalists are people who have sold possibly their entire soul to an Infernal for ultimate power. So you can do those kind of things. And then Wizards touch on tons and tons and tons of stuff in existing material. So we didn't want to devote a bunch of time to Wizards when they cover so many options already.
Now,
so there will be new spells in the book that Wizards can have access to and that kind of stuff. And we will probably get around to doing some Wizard subclasses in the future. But for right now, since Wizards can do all kinds of normal stuff and are a very well-explored class and aren't that much different from what the Iron Kingdoms has when it comes to wizardry, we're going to skip that a little bit.
And to reiterate what Oz said, really push on, there are always going to be new spells, and there's a lot more than just these subclass pages you'll see. For example, the 2 Paladins we mentioned earlier, they're going to have new spells available as their Paladin spells. They will use some existing ones and then these new ones. So we're really going to make sure that these player options really get fleshed out. When I talked about the Storm Knight before, I talked about there being new gear. They're not the only ones that'll have new gear. So as a player, you're going to see spells, backgrounds, gear, feats, these classes. We're just giving you an overview of just the subclasses and classes at the moment, but know that everything's going to come with these to really make them a full, fleshed out offering.
And that's another important little tiny thing that we haven't talked about. You'll notice there are some old classes from our last edition of the game and from other things that don't exist in this. And we're handling some of those with backgrounds. 5e lets you say what you did before you became an adventurer, and that's what backgrounds are. So we're going to have a trencher background and an explorer background.
Aristocrat would be a good example.
Well, we're playing around with what isn't already covered, possibly. Maybe there's going to be aristocrat options that are alternate versions of other backgrounds and stuff, or it might be a fully fleshed out one. But we know there's going to be things like trenchers and explorers and spies, the things that you used to be able to play as a full class are now going to be a background, and they're going to influence what you can do as a character, but not be an entirely class all by themselves.
And the reason I pointed at Aristocrat is for those of you that played Full Metal Fantasy, Aristocrat was one of the careers you could have, where you picked 2 careers to create your character. And so, as Oz is saying, a lot of those careers we're going to fall into things that we don't need to recreate because they already exist, or things that we will add, like the trenchers and so on.
And the last class we've already touched on some is the Warcaster. We don't have a lot to talk about for it right now because it's the most powerful thing in the narrative concepts of the setting. So it's requiring the most balance. We're going to do multiple subclasses. We're looking at what is the most interesting thing to make those different subclasses do. But also, we are keeping in mind that warjacks are an important part of the setting, and warcasters and warjacks are very tied together. But we can't let someone run around with an entire mini party of their own, 10-ton robots killing everything all by themselves. So Warcasters is something we'll talk about more in the future when we get more of it balanced and fleshed out. And
they deserve their own dev chat, to be honest.
Yeah.
But you will be able to play one, and we'll make sure that we don't run into the situation of where you have basically the one god tier character playing the Warcaster, and everyone else is like, I'm a bard, and I'm a ranger, and then you've got somebody running around with a 2-ton robot being like, I don't care. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Like we do want to make sure everything integrates very well, and it makes sense. There are certain drawbacks in that, say, again, you go into the dungeon. Bringing the Warjack into the dungeon is not the easiest thing. And Warjacks require a ton of coal and a ton of water to be able to run on steam power. So keeping one, often in the Iron Kingdoms, when somebody travels with a Warjack, they usually have them in a cart being drawn by a horse.
Yeah.
They're not just walking alongside them the whole time. And then they turn them on. They actually have a non-combat sort of time that they run based on how much coal and water, and then a combat usage time. And say that they run for 8 hours on a standard load of coal and water. Their combat load time is like 30 minutes. So that's stuff that we're going to make sure is already very clean and clear to everybody, and that should make sense when you start to play them.
One of my favorite pieces of advice I've given GMs in the past about balancing Warjacks and things is Warjacks can't sneak.
It's really
They're basically a steam engine on legs, and they weigh so much that they probably can't take a light step. So besides the fact that they're hissing and making those other noises, they're not tiptoeing around. So,
all you got to do, though, is cast silence on their feet, then find a way to make them float, and then just Nobody expects the silenced floating Warjack to fly, just kind of hover into the dungeon and then start shooting cannons. but it happens.
Or you just get one of those fancy convergence warjacks that has a hover pod attached to it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's about all we're going to deep dive on today. And I know that wasn't a deep enough dive for most people who are super, super, super interested.
There's so much to talk about.
But there's a lot to talk about, and keep in mind some of this stuff is still in development and being play tested and reviewed and that kind of stuff. But we want to give you basically a content list of what the player options were for classes so that you could think about what you might incorporate into your existing campaigns or what you might want to do as a brand new player launching into this. And remember, you can go to that website and sign up and get information about when the Kickstarter is coming and all that kind of stuff. But we're also going to put a lot of other content in the book that's going to be more DM advice for things like how to manage a Warjack's Coal and those kind of things. But we're also going to put player options in that are interesting and nod back to our previous editions. So we haven't mentioned feats yet, because feats are going to come into the game under archetypes. And we're not going to use the word archetype because archetype means something else in 5e. But if you played the last edition of the game, you know that part of character creation, besides picking careers, was also picking your archetype, whether you were a mighty character, or a gifted character, or an intellectual character. I almost forgot the word. I almost Hungerford that one.
Yeah.
Morale, the word is morale. Or one of those kind of things. And that's going to be an alternate way of building a character away from other things, and it's gonna lock you into options for feats that you can access so that mighty characters can do cooler mighty things and gifted characters can do cooler magic things and stuff if your GM wants to incorporate that stuff into their campaign. Because a lot of this stuff is being written as these are options you should talk over with your dungeon master because they are the person that is really in charge of what's in the game and what's not in the game.
Yeah. And just so that that basically means you could be a Trollkin or a Nis or an Iozan or a Rulik, but sort of ignore anything that would be normally considered part of that race, and instead go, I'm just playing a mighty character.
Yeah.
And then you go with all the mighty rules, or a skilled character, and then you choose any of the various races of the Iron Kingdoms that you want to play, but you don't necessarily worry about what the Trollkin rules are. You worry about what the mighty rules are instead.
Yeah, and those archetypes are going to let you blend stuff with the existing race characteristics to have more character building options.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be back again later to talk more as development on this product continues, to go deeper into spells and setting options.
And the Monsternomicon.
And the Monsternomicon, which is going to be huge and full of all kinds of good stuff. But again, you can go to the website that we put up on the screen a few times. You can go to the Requiem website. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. It will get you all the information that you need as it happens, as more comes out, whenever we get around to announcing the Kickstarter and having more firm dates on that. But till then, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you're enjoying your virtual Gen Con.
Yeah.
As a reminder, don't forget, we do have our special Gen Con model available right now at store.privateerpress.com. We hope that things are safe and better next year, and that all of us are able to start gathering at conventions safely and securely, and that we see you in person next Gen Con. But if that's not the case, we'll just do this again.
Yeah, we'll be here on the internet in some capacity in the future.
We'll always
Don't
always be here, forever trapped on the internet. So till next time, everybody, take it easy. Enjoy your Gen Con. Bye.
Yeah, bye.